So there's a few constants in our country that history books won't tell you that allow our government to function the way it does. And those three are bankruptcy, war, and emergencies. We've been bankrupt every 70 years. It renews. We're always at war on something. And there's always an emergency, which allows them to enact emergency authorization and executive powers, which are dictatorships. When you have dictators making law, that's not a republic, that's a dictatorship. Without those three things, there's a policy officer, not a law enforcement officer. Without those three things, we would have a republic, de jure government. But what we really have is a de facto corporate government. And those three things are the mainstays. And the 1933 bankruptcy made us all slaves. Through the birth certificate, the 14th Amendment, U.S. citizen, Social Security, we are essentially collateral, bonded sureties. Our persons are, not us, the men and women. Our persons are bonded sureties ever since the bankruptcy. Because basically, you got to think of it like this. The government has no money, right? We got off the gold standard. There's no real substance, there's no actual money anymore, right? After 1933. So how are we going to function with no money? We have to get money from the international bankers, right? So they pledged our commercial energy. So that gives you an idea of why our labor, our energy is essentially used as collateral for that bankruptcy. Makes sense, right? I don't know how many people really realize that our government is bankrupt. Our country is bankrupt. The corporation is bankrupt. And so basically all the courts and the bar association that runs the courts are just essentially administering the bankruptcy. That's why all these courts are now just administrative courts rather than a court of record, which is the Article 3, 6th and 7th Amendment constitutional common law court with a trial by jury that we are lawfully allowed to have on any dispute over $20. But we have administrative courts, not the common law courts. And we've all been to those administrative courts where you get a ticket and there's no crime, there's no victim. They're just administering you. They're just taking money from you, and they're doing it with all their statutes and codes and ordinances and orders and mandates, which are not law. But you could see how our country has turned in. It's all just money. It's all commerce. It's all commerce, and so you can choose not to contract with when you get one of those tickets. You can sign the ticket a certain way and send it back within 72 hours. And essentially, let them know you don't agree to that contract. Everything is contracts. So you can see how our country is the way it is because we are just being administered. They're taking our money essentially, even though we have not broken any laws. They just are making money from us. They're extracting money from us and administering our property essentially for the bankruptcy. And then you throw in there's always a war on something, there's always an emergency, which now enables the commander-in-chief, which is a military term, which really shows that we are under martial law too. And they enact these executive orders, which gives the illusion that the president has the ability to make law, which he does not. His executive orders only apply to his government agencies, his government employees, and what is a government employee? It's a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen. So then that goes back to the 14th Amendment and how they got everyone to be under the jurisdiction of USA Inc. And everyone essentially is an employee of USA Inc. and gets benefits and privileges. So that's the root of why we want to correct our status, our standing, our property, and our obligation. Because they are presuming through actions that we are taking throughout our lives, they're presuming that we are U.S. citizens, and when we sign documents and when we agree to their contract offers, we are basically saying we are 14th Amendment citizens who have no rights. We are just persons, and we don't have unalienable rights. We have benefits and privileges that come with being an employee of USA Inc. Does that make sense? So ultimately, it comes back to us knowing who we are, and who we are is either a person in the public or a man or a woman in the private. There's a very big distinction. And the standing, you want to stand on the land. You don't want to be lost at sea like they're presuming you are with the Admiralty Maritime Law. So Admiralty is from the military, admiral, and then maritime is the law of the sea, commerce, contract law. And if we're not standing on the land, knowing who we are as men and women under natural law and common law, the Creator's laws, then we are presumed to be lost at sea. 14th Amendment, U.S. citizens, where we don't have unalienable rights, we have benefits and privileges, and we are an employee of the corporation, so we have to abide by all their statutes, mandates, codes, and etc. So it goes back to jurisdiction, and if you can prove that you have standing on the land as a man, and you're a state citizen or an American national or a non-U.S. state citizen. There's a lot of different terms, but it comes back to being essentially a non-U.S. citizen. And in that case, you would be a state citizen. And there's a big difference between uppercase state and lowercase state, and uppercase citizen and lowercase citizen. So it's all wordplay, and it's all presumptions, and those presumptions lead to contracts, and those contracts lead to us having an obligation to the state, and that essentially places us in servitude. And so we just want to come out of her, my people. We want to come out of Babylon in this matrix. And we do so by correcting our status, standing, property, and obligation. And it's a lot of paperwork, and a lot of us are just going through, taking steps to do it. But don't get overwhelmed, because it really all just starts in your head. And it starts with knowing who you are, first of all. And that is the most important thing, because you can do paperwork all day long. You can do templates that people send you. But you really need to understand who you are. And when you come to that understanding that you really, truly are, you were born on the soil. You were born on the land. But when you are born, they put the sole of your feet. They essentially steal your soul at that point and put your sole of your feet on a piece of paper for the birth certificate, right? And then that's the first thing you touched. So they get us early, but we can come out and just take some steps. They've gotten us confused on the difference between legal and lawful. Legal is the undoing of God's laws. Remember that. God's laws, natural law, is the only law that's real, and that's don't violate the property rights of other sentient beings, treat others like you would want to be treated, and love your Creator. That's it. If you do violate the property rights of sentient beings and you harm somebody, then you have broken the law. And then you go to your neighbor and try to make peace and figure it out. But if you don't, you're not violating any law. And mandates and orders and ordinances and guidelines, they apply only to persons and U.S. citizens. So he who creates it controls it. So the government created the person, the 14th Amendment U.S. citizen. So If you say you are that, they can control you and you are under their jurisdiction. But I'm only under the jurisdiction of the Creator because the Creator created me, a man. Big difference between a person and a man.